Alright, in today's video we're diving straight into the best weapon martial arts for PvP in Where Winds Meet. If you've been dueling other players and wondering why some builds feel absolutely unstoppable while yours feels questionable, don't worry, we're breaking it all down. This tier list is focused purely on PvP performance, so we're talking real combat situations, pressure, burst potential, survivability, mobility, and how well each martial art performs against skilled opponents. I'll walk you through the overall rankings, explain why certain weapon martial arts dominate the meta, and what makes others more situational but still viable in the right hands. This isn't just about raw damage. It's about control, combo potential, adaptability, and how consistent each style feels when things get intense. So if you're trying to climb, win more duels, or just understand the PvP landscape better, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. I'm quickly moving on to the video and I'm ranking weapon martial arts for PvP in Where Winds Meet. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching. The weapon martial arts for PvP in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Stormbreaker Spear, Soulshade Umbrella, and Panacea Fan. Now here is the part of the list where things get a little controversial. Not bad, not amazing, just sitting right in that awkward middle ground where you can win with them, but you are going to have to work for it. Welcome to the B tier of weapon martial arts for player versus player in Where Winds Meet. Let's start with the Stormbreaker Spear. This weapon absolutely loves players who enjoy baiting their opponents. Defensive buffs combined with uninterruptible animations mean you can intentionally invite aggression, absorb pressure, and then respond at the perfect moment. It rewards patience and mind games more than raw aggression. The problem is that while it feels solid and sometimes even frustrating to fight against, it does not apply enough consistent offensive pressure to truly shape the player versus player meta. You are reacting more than dictating the pace of the fight, and in high-level matches, that difference really matters. Still, do not underestimate it. In the hands of someone who understands spacing and timing, the Stormbreaker Spear can feel like a wall that occasionally stabs you for your mistakes. It just lacks that explosive presence that forces opponents to panic. It is strong, but it is not scary, and in competitive environments, being scary counts for a lot. Now let's talk about the Soulshade Umbrella. Yes, it looks stylish, yes, it feels unique. But in player versus player, healing values are reduced, and that change hits this weapon hard. Its core identity revolves around sustain, and when sustain is weakened, the entire game plan starts to wobble. Compared to weapons that bring heavy burst damage, strong crowd control, or relentless pressure, the Soulshade Umbrella struggles to keep up. That does not mean it is useless, it just means you are no longer outlasting people as easily as you might expect. Instead of slowly draining your opponent's hope, you often find yourself racing against their burst potential. And unfortunately, burst damage tends to win those races. Style points? Absolutely. Meta dominance? Not quite. Finally, we have the Panacea Fan, which unfortunately suffers from a very similar issue. Just like the Soulshade Umbrella, its healing is toned down in player versus player combat. That reduction significantly limits its overall impact. When your main advantage is sustain and that sustain is weaker, you are forced to play more cautiously and more creatively. Meanwhile, other weapons are applying stronger pressure, delivering higher burst damage, and locking you down with crowd control. The Panacea Fan can still shine in coordinated play or in the hands of someone who understands positioning perfectly. But in direct comparisons, it falls behind weapons that can actively force mistakes instead of waiting for them. It is elegant, it is technical, and it can absolutely win games. It just does not consistently control the battlefield the way top tier options do. And that is exactly why these weapons sit comfortably in B tier. The weapon martial arts for PvP in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Heavenquaker Spear, Nameless Spear, Vernal Umbrella, Mortal Rope Dart, Inkwell Fan, Phalanx Baneblade, Everspring Umbrella, and Unfettered Rope Dart. If B tier was the awkward middle child, A tier is the overachiever who just barely missed valedictorian. These weapon martial arts in Where Winds Meet absolutely dominate in player versus player. They just have one small flaw keeping them from sitting at the top of the food chain. Let's kick things off with the Heavenquaker Spear. This weapon feels incredibly reliable thanks to its hyper armor charge attacks. You commit, you power through, and you make people regret trying to interrupt you. On top of that, it has excellent bleed synergy, which gives it strong combo potential and steady damage over time pressure. The catch is that you mostly see it shine inside strategic sword builds. Outside of that specific setup, it loses some of its luster. It is powerful, yes, but it does not branch out as cleanly into other compositions, which limits how often it shows up at the highest levels of play. Next up is the Nameless Spear. The paralysis initiation on this weapon is terrifying. If it connects, you are almost guaranteed to start a combo sequence that can completely swing momentum. It is one of the most threatening openers in player versus player. The problem is predictability. Once experienced players recognize the pattern, they start baiting it out. Follow-up options are also more limited compared to true S-tier weapons. So even though the opener is amazing, the overall pressure does not quite keep up with the very best. Now we move to the Vernal Umbrella. Long-range paralysis is always scary. Landing it feels like hitting the jackpot because the reward is huge and often leads directly into high damage sequences. But here is the risk. The animations are slow, and if you miss, you are extremely punishable. Against sharp opponents, that heavy punish potential becomes a real liability. That high-risk, high-reward design is exactly what keeps it just below S-tier. The Mortal Rope Dart is where synergy becomes everything. On its own, it is decent. Pair it with Infernal Twin Blades, however, and suddenly it becomes a monster. Wrap procs and range sustain turn it into a pressure machine that constantly threatens explosive damage swings. Outside of that pairing though, its impact drops sharply. It does not bring enough standalone value to dominate by itself. With Infernal Twin Blades, it is a high value pick. Without them, it feels incomplete. The Inkwell Fan shares a similar identity to the Vernal Umbrella in terms of long-range paralysis. When it lands, the reward is massive and can completely flip a fight in your favor. However, it suffers from the same weakness, slow animations and heavy punish potential on a miss. That risk factor forces disciplined play. It is powerful, but it demands precision, which naturally keeps it just under the top tier. Now let's talk about the Phalanx Bane Blade. This weapon has incredible synergy with the Snow Parting Blade. Together, they create a very threatening setup with layered buffs and specialized utility. On its own though, the Phalanx Bane Blade is more niche. It does not feel as universally threatening without that pairing. It is still a strong, solid choice thanks to its buffs and utility tools, but its specialized role prevents it from claiming a spot in S tier. The Everspring Umbrella performs extremely well in player versus player. Safe range pressure, strong mobility tools, access to tenacity, and burst windows during Flower Burial make it a versatile and dangerous option. It can harass from a distance, set up clean combos, and then transition smoothly into melee. Its only real weakness is timing. Those massive Flower Burial plays can be completely shut down if mistimed. When executed properly, it looks unstoppable. When misplayed, it can crumble quickly. Finally, we have the Unfettered Rope Dart. This weapon is genuinely threatening because of its burst potential, access to tenacity, and ability to rapidly apply soul break pressure. In the right hands, it creates explosive damage windows that punish even small mistakes. However, it is largely a combo-focused weapon with long cooldowns. It also lacks strong engage tools, which means you often rely on your opponent making the first move. When everything lines up, it looks like S tier, but those limitations keep it firmly planted in A tier instead. The weapon martial arts for PvP in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Snow Parting Blade, Strategic Sword, Nameless Sword, Infernal Twin Blades, and Thundercry Blade. And now we are no longer talking about strong picks. We are talking about the weapons that define the battlefield. The ones that make people sigh in the loading screen because they already know what is coming. This is S tier in where wins meet player versus player. The Snow Parting Blade is pure menace. Excellent mobility, high burst damage, and attacks that are genuinely difficult to dodge make it a nightmare to deal with. It sticks to targets like glue, constantly forcing unfavorable trades. You try to reset, it chases. You try to counter. It is already mid-combo. Its speed alone shifts the tempo of a fight, and once it gains momentum, it rarely gives it back. Then we have the Strategic Sword, the nightmare of tanks and healing heavy builds. This weapon thrives on stacking damage over time pressure. Second track slash and inner track slash apply bleed rapidly, and once you reach 5 or more stacks, inner balance strike consumes them for massive burst damage. It is methodical, calculated, and devastating. Against durable opponents, it does not panic, it dismantles. Nameless Sword is the definition of controlled aggression. It dominates with range pressure, clean gap closing, and extremely safe disengage options. Charged attacks harass from a distance, forcing reactions. Daunting Strike closes the gap instantly for burst damage. Shadow Step lets you disengage safely and even re-engage on your own terms. It is perfect for hit and run play, but it is just as deadly in extended fights. Infernal Twin Blades are pure chaos in motion. Extreme mobility combined with relentless combo pressure allows this weapon to stay glued to opponents. Once it starts a sequence, it feels endless. Infernal Mode makes you uninterruptible, removing much of the usual risk tied to aggressive play. The raw damage numbers might look modest on paper, but in practice, the oppressive combo chains overwhelm opponents before they can stabilize. Finally, the Thundercry Blade brings a different flavor of dominance. It is not about flashy burst windows, it is about control and attrition. Frequent, uninterruptible skills combined with defensive shields allow it to trade safely over and over again. It chips enemies down, wins extended engagements, and thrives in prolonged fights. You think you are winning the exchange, and then you realize you have been slowly losing the entire time. What makes these weapons S tier is not just damage, it is consistency. They dictate pace, they create pressure without overcommitting. They offer mobility, safety, and reliable win conditions that do not depend on perfect scenarios. In high-level player versus player, reliability is everything. Snow Parting Blade sticks and bursts. Strategic Sword dismantles durability. Nameless Sword controls space. Infernal Twin Blades suffocate opponents. Thundercry Blade outlasts and outtrades. These are not situational picks, these are meta-shaping tools. When you see them across from you, you do not just adjust your playstyle, you adjust your expectations, and that is the real difference. S-tier weapons do not ask for permission to win, they build their own opportunities and force the game to revolve around them. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.